You'll see today that the city of Paris was born along the river. And from the river, because these things to trade on the Seine that the city flourished across the centuries. And you can also see that the main buildings and Paris are essentially along the river. This is why we talk about massive percent Paris landscape. And is today on the list of UNESCO World Heritage. This outdoor should be before everything a very nice sunrise. Et à gauche, vous pouvez voir une flamme dorée. C'est celle que tient la Statue de la Liberté à New York. On your left, you can see a golden flame. It's the same as Statue of Liberty in New York, also the same height as this. And we have it here because the Statue of Liberty was given to the United States by France in 1886 to celebrate the independence of the country. And we got this golden flame 100 years later to show that the Nous avons cette flamme dorée à Paris parce que c'est la France qui a offert la Statue de la Liberté aux États-Unis en 1886 pour célébrer l'indépendance du pays, une indépendance que la France a été le premier pays à reconnaître. Et donc en 1986, on nous offre cette flamme dorée pour nous montrer que les États-Unis sont toujours des amis. Pour une grande exposition universelle. Le but étant ici de montrer la puissance technique de la France, bien sûr. Cette grande dernière, elle est faite de verre et de métal, fer, acier et verre. Et ce sont les matériaux de la révolution industrielle. Donc le but ici, c'est de montrer que la France a maîtrisé ces matériaux au XIXe siècle et qu'elle restera une grande puissance industrielle au XXe siècle. On your left, behind the trees, you can see a French flag. Under this flag, you can see the largest glass ceiling in Europe. It belongs to the Great Palace. The Great Palace was built for the World Fair of 1900, a very symbolic World Fair because we changed century. And France had been an industrial power in the 19th century, the age of the Industrial Revolution. We wanted to show here that it would remain an industrial power even if the United States or Germany were becoming a very strong industrial. So here you see this great glass ceiling is made with the two great materials of the Industrial Revolution. Des expositions d'art, en temps normal, mais aussi on y installe une patinoire chaque hiver. En ce moment, eh bien, le Grand Palais est fermé au public. Il y a un palais éphémère construit près de la Tour Eiffel. Il rouvrira pour les Jeux Olympiques. C'est là qu'on veut les épreuves de ski. So you see the Great Palace is a very large structure, so large that we could organize horse races under the Great Palace in the early 20th century. And that's also where we organize normally great art exhibitions. But at the moment it's closed to the public. So there is a temporary structure near the Eiffel Tower. And this winter there will not be an ice skating rink as there is usually under the Great Glass Ceiling of the Great Palace. It's one of the destination. And we will reopen for the Olympic Games. That's where the fencing contest will take place. Et nous approchons à présent du pont Alexandre III, construit lui aussi pour l'exposition universelle de 1900, de qui mène au Grand Palais et au Petit Palais construit juste de l'autre côté. Et c'est à partir du pont Alexandre III que normalement des épreuves de natation devraient se tenir pendant les Jeux Olympiques, mais pour le moment l'eau n'est pas assez forte. So we are now reaching the Alexander III Bridge. It was also built for the 1900 World Fair. You see it leads to the Great Palace and to the small palace that is just on the other side. These three buildings were the masterpieces of this great World Fair. And you see the Alexander III Bridge is actually very low, which was very technical at the time because you have to absorb the weight of the arches on both sides. And it's also very luxurious because the statues on both sides are gilded. And originally in the street lamps, there was not normal glass but baccarat crystal, which is the purest kind of crystal. And normally next year, for the Olympic Games, some swimming contests were supposed to take place from the Alexander III Bridge into the Seine River, but for the moment the water is not clear. So I'm not really sure. There is a plan B, I hope so. Donc c'est un pont qui est très luxueux, vous remarquez de chaque côté les statues sont dorées à la feuille d'or. Et à l'origine, the king will be replaced by a guillotine. It is in Concord Square that thousands of people will be beheaded, guillotined. This includes, of course, the king and the queen of the time, Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. And only a few months later, leaders of the French Revolution, such as Danton or Robespierre, because the wind turned very quickly. And we're going to pass under a bridge that was started under the King Louis XVI, but finished during the French Revolution, using stones from the Bastille. The Bastille was a great fortress, a prison, that was destroyed on the 14th of July 1789, which is today our national day. So stones from the Bastille are actually in this bridge. Et nous passons sous le pont de la Concorde, commencé sous le roi Louis XVI, déterminé pendant la Révolution en utilisant les rivières de la Bresse. Donc on va rejoindre la place de la Concorde à la fin de la Révolution et on va y installer l'obélisque de Luxembourg en 1836, une manière de faire oublier les événements sanglants de la Révolution. L'obélisque nous a été offert en 1829 par le vice-roi d'Égypte, Mehmet Ali, et il a fallu 6 années pour le ramener et l'installer à Paris. So we renamed Revolution Square into Concord Square at the end of the French Revolution. The idea was to show that now the French people wanted harmony and not anymore civil war. And we put the obelisk from Luxor on Concord Square in 1836. It was a way to make people to erase the bad memories linked to that square. This obelisk was a gift made to France by the Viceroy of Egypt, Mehmet Ali, in exchange for a great trade agreement in 1839. But it took 6 more years to bring it here because it's very heavy, 230 tons, and it measures 23 meters. We had the most beautiful weather to look at the banks of the Seine. This is just the best weather you can hope for.
Yeah. Oh, that's all it's like. Under den Bro, hvor det var, at der hvor det var
Et à droite, de l'autre côté de la passerelle, on aperçoit une exposition de 1900. C'était la gare de l'Ouest, aujourd'hui c'est la gare de Montparnasse qui l'a remplacée. C'est pour ça que toutes les villes présentées en façade sont à l'Ouest. Et bien c'était très pratique, hein, ça permettait aux milliers de visiteurs de l'exposition d'arriver à proximité du Grand Palais, du Petit Palais ou du Point Latine. On your right, you can see a very large museum. It's the Orsay Museum. If you look at its facade, you can see very large clocks as well as the names of French cities. Because originally this building was a railway station, built for the 1900 World Fair. This railway allowed to leave Paris or arrive to Paris from cities in the west of France. This is why you can only see cities from the southwest or Brittany on the facade. Now the station that you can use to get to Brittany is Louvre Palace, which is much more modern. But in 1900 this station was very convenient because it allowed thousands of people to reach Paris and to arrive nearby the Great Palace, the Small Palace, or the Alexandrian Gate. Donc c'est devenu un musée consacré à l'art du 19e siècle des années 70. On y trouve alors bien sûr les impressionnistes, les grandes collections du monde, mais aussi d'autres styles, le style très personnel et envoyant de la le réalisme de Courbet, et bien le style exotique coloré de Paul. So the Orsay station became a museum in the 1970s. If you like the art from the 19th century, that's where you have to go, but it's very varied. We usually think about the Impressionist painters, as of course there is one of the largest collections of Impressionist paintings in the Orsay Museum. But you can also find Orientalist paintings, Realism, like Courbet, the very exotic and colorful style of Paul Gauguin, and also, of course, Vincent Van Gogh and his dreamy paintings. Et à votre gauche, un très grand musée, mais cette fois-ci, c'était une résidence royale. Il s'agit du Louvre. Le Louvre qui est aujourd'hui le plus grand musée du monde à égalité avec celui de l'Ermitage à Saint-Pétersbourg. 28 km de galeries, puisqu'à l'origine, eh bien, c'était un monument extrêmement important, c'était le palais des rois de France. Les rois de France vont s'installer ici dès le XIVe siècle, mais à l'époque, ce qu'on aurait trouvé, c'est une grande forteresse, le donjon du Louvre, construit à la fin du XIIe siècle pour protéger la ville des attaques anglaises. Si vous entrez dans le Louvre, vous pouvez toujours voir les fondations de ce donjon au niveau intérieur. Et le Louvre actuel, c'est le projet de François Ier, à la Renaissance, agrandi ensuite par de nombreux rois et empereurs. C'est résultat d'environ 400 ans d'histoire. So on your left now you can see another very large museum. Actually the largest museum in the world, according to the Heritage Museum in St. Petersburg, is of course the Louvre Museum. This is so large because originally it was the palace of the French kings. French kings settled there in the 14th century. But the 14th century, that's still the Middle Ages in France. And there were none of the buildings that you see today, but a dungeon, a medieval fortress designed in the late 12th century to protect the city against the English. Any English on board? No? No? Okay. Good. Just kidding, of course. You're all welcome today. But if you go into the Louvre Museum, you will still be able to see this great fortress in the underground of the museum. And the actual Louvre was started in the Renaissance period in the early 16th century, and it was continually enlarged by many kings and emperors over about 400 years. Et à droite, le dôme de l'Académie française, une vieille institution créée au XVIIe siècle par Richelieu, le principal ministre de Louis XIII, pour harmoniser, réguler la langue française, puisqu'à l'époque, on parlait différents dialectes et un Français du Nord avait parfois du mal à comprendre un Français du Sud. On your right, you can see the dome of the French Academy. The French Academy is an old institution created in the early 17th century by the Prime Minister of the King, Richelieu. Richelieu had a problem. A Frenchman from the north would not always understand a Frenchman from the south, the east, or the west. They all spoke different dialects. So the French Academy was supposed to regulate the French language, on the model of the dialects spoken around Paris. It worked, and today the academicians still decide which word will or will not enter at the next dictionary. Still very centralized. Et nous allons passer sur le pont neuf. Le pont neuf qui nous fait 300 grimaces à la seconde avec ses 300 petits mascarons et qui est en fait le plus vieux pont de Paris, terminé en 1606 à l'époque d'Henri IV. We're going to pass under a very rude bridge. You can see that it can make 320 faces in just 1 second. It's decorated with 300 masks. And it's also the oldest bridge in Paris. And its name is very similar to the old new bridge. So, more than 400 years old. And we call it a new bridge because at the time, in the early 17th century, it was an absolute novelty. It was the first bridge made using only stones in Paris, and the first bridge without houses nor shops on top of it. Now, buildings on top of many bridges in Paris until only 200 years ago. Donc ce pont, on l'a appelé le pont neuf au début du XVIIe siècle parce que c'était une nouveauté absolue. On avait ce premier pont construit entièrement en pierre à Paris et aussi le premier pont qui ne portait ni boutique ni maison. Et donc nous entrons dans le vieux Paris avec à gauche l'île de la Cité, l'une des 3 îles que l'on trouve dans Paris, et à droite, eh bien, le 6e et 5e arrondissement. C'est vraiment le vieux Paris. C'est là que la cité gallo-romaine de Lucas a été fondée, au niveau du Panthéon et du Forum. On a toujours des vestiges peints. Le terme de Lucas, c'est l'actuel musée de Cluny, le musée du Moyen-Âge. Et dans ce quartier se développent également les grandes universités médiévales telles que la Sorbonne. C'est pour ça qu'on l'appelle quartier latin, puisque dans les universités au Moyen-Âge, on étudiait en latin. So we are now entering into the old Paris. On your left, you can see the City Island. It's one of the 3 islands that you can find in the heart of Paris. And Julius Caesar used to say that Celtic tribe settled there before the Roman conquest. And this Celtic tribe was found to call the Parisi. No evidence, no archaeological evidence. But when we renamed the city in the 4th century, we reminded those Parisi people, and we called the city Paris instead of Lutetia. But the Roman city of Lutetia developed on the right side, in what is called today the Latin Quarter. So this is really the oldest part of Paris. The Roman Forum was near the actual here. And you can see the windows, the Romans with the Roman pass. That's how I think we have the Romans. And so we also find medieval universities around Concord, for instance. And in these universities, people study in Latin. That's why we talk today about the Latin Quarter.
Where's the sun?
Gee, just gotta say hi.
gauche, bien sûr, la cathédrale Notre Dame, qui est une merveille de l'architecture gothique classique, construite entre le 2e et le 13e siècle. Elle a environ 150 ans, toute est renommée Notre Dame. Et à l'époque, c'était le plus haut monument de la ville. C'est l'époque prospère, le 13e siècle. C'est une création artistique qui va notamment la maison de la ville. So on your left, you can see the wonderful cathedral, Notre Dame. It's a masterpiece of classical Gothic architecture. It was built during the 12th and the 13th century. And it took about 150 years to finish this cathedral. And at the time, it was the highest monument in the city. The 13th century is really a very peaceful period, a very prosperous one, when the arts are going to flourish. Especially in Paris, that's where the Gothic architecture will go. Aujourd'hui, Notre-Dame, elle est éloignée sous les échafaudages. Et ça, c'est à cause de l'incendie de 2019. Donc, il a fallu consolider le monument après l'incendie, reconstruire la voûte en pierre, la charpente, mais aussi la toiture et la flèche qui s'élevait à l'origine à 86 mètres. Aujourd'hui, on reconstruit à l'identique, c'est-à-dire avec une structure essentiellement médiévale, mais en tenant compte des modifications apportées par l'architecte Eugène Viollet-le-Duc au 19e siècle, lors de précédente restauration. So, you saw that Notre Dame is buried under the scaffoldings. This is because of the fire of 2019. The fire made the building very fragile, and the stone boards, the wooden structure under the roof and the spire were destroyed. So now we are rebuilding the cathedral as it was before the fire, which means a structure from the Middle Ages, essentially, but we will also reproduce the additions that were made in the 19th century during previous restoration. Et à gauche, elle a l'hôtel de ville de Paris. And on your left, you have this beautiful view on the town hall of the city. Elle a été essentiellement créée au XVIIe siècle. De très beaux hôtels particuliers, ils seront construits à cette époque. Now we're sailing along St. Louis Island. It's a beautiful island to have a walk on because the facades you can see are essentially from the 17th century. Not all, but many of those. I will show you, for instance, the most expensive townhouse in Paris. It's on St. Louis Island. Et à droite, vous pouvez voir le jardin Tino Rossi, qui est aussi un musée de la ville de Paris, un musée de sculpture à ciel ouvert. Se retrouve vraiment dans sculpture représentée par les artistes anglais, les acteurs vraiment de la sculpture du XXe siècle, comme Grand Cousins, Atkin ou même géographique. On the right, you can see the Tino Rossi Gardens. It's also an open-air sculpture museum. You can find no less than 30 sculptures from the second half of the 20th century that were given to the city by the artists themselves. And some are very famous names of contemporary structure, such as Zadkine, Brancusi, or Jean. It's also a very joyful place because people go there to dance when the weather is nice. Alors, nous allons faire demi-tour vers la Tour Eiffel. Je vais marquer une courte pause. Si vous cherchez le bar, il est au centre du bateau. Si vous cherchez les toilettes, elles sont à l'arrière, dans la partie rouge. So we're going to go back towards the Eiffel Tower. We're going to have a short break. If you're looking for the bar, it's in the middle of the boat. If you're looking for the restrooms are at the back in the red part of the boat. And be careful at the end of the cruise, people are usually queuing in front of the toilet, so better to go where the boat is still. les deux îles et de très beaux hôtels seront construits sur l'île Saint-Louis. On va vite surnommer l'île Palais. Sailing along St. Louis Island. 400 years ago, there were actually two islands. The Cow Island, which was a meadow with cows on it, and an island where washerwomen came to do the laundry. So it was a very quiet place. But in the early 17th century, Paris is the largest city in Europe, and it keeps growing. So the king needs new bridges, like the one that passed under, and also new docks. He will unite these two islands, and beautiful townhouses will be built on it. So it will soon be nicknamed the Palace Island. So women would wash their clothes in the Seine River, because you could do everything in the Seine River. You would also have a bath. It was fashionable in the 1630s to have a bath in the Seine River, and you would also get your water from the Seine River. It was not very clean indeed, because people would also clean the animals' skins in the Seine, just a bit further down. So water was not good, but that was all we had. So what people would do at the time was to put a spoon of vinegar into the water to make it drinkable. A very painful job was to carry the water from the Seine to different houses in Paris, and hard working water carriers could do as many as 30 walks back and through from the Seine to the city. One bucket each night. It was one of the most painful jobs I could do in Paris. On faisait tout dans la Seine, il faut imaginer qu'on lavait le linge, on se lavait soi-même, hein, c'était à la mode, les bains de Seine dans les années 1830, mais c'est aussi là qu'on allait prendre l'eau qu'on disait bonne à boire. Elle n'est pas vraiment bonne à boire, parce que les tanneurs lavaient aussi les peaux d'animaux dans la Seine. Mais bon, pour la rendre buvable, eh bien, il suffisait d'y mettre une cuillère de vinaigre. Voilà. C'est pas très agréable, mais c'est toujours mieux. C'est bien. Et un métier extrêmement pénible, c'était aussi celui de porteur d'eau. Un porteur d'eau pouvait faire jusqu'à 30 allers-retours depuis les logements parisiens jusqu'à la Seine, en portant eh bien, un bac dans chaque main. Un autre métier pénible, c'était eh bien, de tirer le bois flotté de l'eau. Un bois flotté, c'est du bois qu'on ramenait sur l'eau en flottant pour ensuite réchauffer les logements parisiens. Et en fait, ces travailleurs pouvaient passer la journée à moitié immergés, ce qui faisait que l'eau était très facile. So another very painful job was to be in charge of taking out of the water the logs that were taken to Paris floating on the Seine. And so these workers would spend most of the day half into the water, and they usually died a few months after. The idea was to bring some food to warm the Parisian interiors. It used to be the palace of the French kings. Until the 14th century, it was renovated in the 19th century. Donc voilà, la conciergerie Palais des Rois de France jusqu'au XIVe siècle, restaurée au XIXe siècle. Nous retrouvons le pont neuf qui enjambe les deux bras de la Seine. And we will now pass again under the new bridge because it goes both arms of the Seine. C'est là que sont nés les bouquinistes des quais de Seine. Ils vendaient leurs livres sur le Pont-Neuf avant d'obtenir les boîtes vertes qu'on voit aujourd'hui et qui sont en danger de disparition à cause des Jeux Olympiques, puisque les bouquinistes c'est leur travail durant les 2 mois d'été qui sont des mois très lucratifs. Et ces boîtes, certaines de ces boîtes ont 200 ans d'âge. Il n'est pas certain qu'elles survivent à leur déplacement. So it's also on the new bridge that the Parisian booksellers were born. Those the same you can see now along the Seine River, selling books in these green boxes. But these very old and traditional booksellers are today threatened by the Olympic Games because the Parisian mayor decided to take many boxes away for the inauguration celebration. But these boxes are sometimes 200 years old, so they're very fragile, and these will also prevent the Parisian booksellers from selling their books for 2 months in a year. And very unfortunate, so it's not absolutely sure that many of those will be able to continue their job after the Olympic Games. Et à gauche, vous pourrez voir bientôt le petit bâtiment des bords de Seine. Ce sont vraiment 2 fenêtres l'une sur l'autre, à côté d'un gros bâtiment en briques rouges avec des échafaudages. Vraiment tout petit bâtiment. So just now, on your left, you will see the smallest building on the banks of the Seine. It's 2 windows, one above the other, and next to the very large brick building. Just there is the Seine in front of you, but it's tiny. And in this tiny building lived a philosopher of the Enlightenment called Jean-Jacques Rousseau, a Swiss philosopher of the 18th century. Petit bâtiment a vécu un grand philosophe des Lumières, le philosophe Jean-Jacques Rousseau, au XVIIIe siècle. Et à gauche, vous pouvez voir une très belle